You know when you got a job that you hate? Right? Like, has anybody ever had one of those? A job that they just hate? Nobody? Most fortunate room of employed folks I've ever seen. I had a job I didn't like. I hated it. I hated working for Capital Supply and Service. Don't get me wrong, I had a few good times there. But I was away from my family for so long, and it just really bothered me. I didn't like it. But if you've got a boss that's worth anything, one of the things that they're going to do is they're going to see to it that every once in a while you've got something that you can look forward to. And one of the things that they did for us was they had a golf outing every year. It was a lot of fun. That's going to be the one thing. I'm going to miss that this summer. I might just go anyway. I don't know. But here's the thing about this golf outing. In this company that had 5 different locations, more than 60 people from all these different locations would show up. And what we had was, out of those 60 people, we had maybe 8 people who they could, how do you want to say this? Golf. The rest, we're just some fools that had some clubs that slowed those people that could golf way down. And one of the years I was fortunate enough to golf with in a foursome that had somebody that really knew what they were doing. In fact, they had, at one point, they had given some golf lessons, I guess. And here's me playing golf, okay? You should understand that, first of all, I know how it works. How it works is that if the tee is that way, nope. If the pin is that way, yeah, I know how it works, barely. If the pin is that way, or the flag, or the hole, and you are teeing off from here, what you need to do is you need to line your body up this way, get your feet here, get the one foot in front of the thing, and then the golf club, and the boom, and then it goes that way. Well, when I golf, it's one of these. Okay, I'm lined up here, we're all good. It's that way. Okay, so what I need to do is stand here and aim that way. Because I've got this thing they call a slice. And when I hit the ball, it just, bing, exactly, right? I don't know how to fix that. But it's pretty much consistent, because if I stand the right way, like 2 or 3 holes into it, man, my ball is going to end up right in the middle of the fairway every time, as long as I'm aiming far enough that way. So as I'm golfing with this guy who actually knows what he's doing, I say, hey, you see any problems with what I'm doing? He goes, oh, yeah. Yep, there's some problems there. I can see about 10 right now. I'm like, well, how do I fix all those problems? He's like, you find the one problem that's causing the other 9. I said, well, that makes sense. Can you tell me what that is? He said, no, I don't know. Might be this, might be that. Fact is, he couldn't tell me right then and there. And when we look at the world today, we're going to find that there's a few problems, maybe 10. We'll just lowball it. But with all the problems in the world that there is there one problem that causes all the others? Is there a root cause to all these other problems? The Bible gives us an answer to that. The answer is, yep, there sure is. And Jesus dealt with that particular problem. The epicenter of all the other problems on the cross. And when that problem was addressed, Jesus declared this: it is finished. So the question comes to us, well, what is finished? What do you mean, it? What happened on the cross that makes it such a big deal? I'd like to start today in the book of Matthew, chapter 27, 2 verses, 41 and 42. where we find a question of sorts that's being presented on behalf of the, or by the religious leaders at the time. The Bible reads, "Likewise also the chief priests mocking him with the scribes and elders said, He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he be the king of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him." There's a great deal of mockery and venom behind the words of these church leaders. But despite that, their assessment of the situation at that very moment, spot on. I mean, they really nailed it, didn't they? I mean, Jesus could not save himself and save us as well. It was not even possible. Christ was in the midst of an either-or situation, one or the other. On the one hand, he could save himself, but that would have left us in eternal jeopardy. Now, on the other hand, he could save us all. But in order to do that, he's going to have to sacrifice himself on the cross. And this was part of the plan since the fall of man in the Garden of Eden. God would restore life to the world through the death of his Son on the cross on Calvary. The cross is quite a profound symbol in Christianity, isn't it? Maybe. There's a comedian out there who, I don't know, he thinks he's funny. But he's got a little bit about that. About like if Jesus would have been sentenced at the time to the electric chair, that there'd be a bunch of silly Christians running around with necklaces that had metal electric chairs hanging off them. And he couldn't understand how the implement of execution is something that we adore so much. Couldn't explain it. And to give an answer to that, to give like a one-sentence rebuttal, man, I don't know what I'd say. That's a lot to put into a sentence because there's a lot that has to do with the cross. I mean, the cross bears with it two very stark realities. Okay? It reveals both the holiness of God, and it also reveals the severity of sin. I mean, the idea that God is a holy God is sort of a foundational principle found in the Bible, isn't it? Like, that's pretty much a truth that we get from the start of the book of Genesis to the end of the book of Revelation. It's a reoccurring theme, we'll call it. Holy means to be set apart, be spiritually perfect or pure, untainted by evil or sin, to be sinless. In the Old Testament, we find in the book of Habakkuk, chapter 1, verse 13, the very beginning of that verse reads, "Thou art of purer eyes than to behold evil, and canst not look on iniquity." And then in the book of Revelation, the words of Jesus, when speaking in reference to the modern day Laodicean church, in Revelation 3:16 says, "So then, because thou art lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth." A couple of words in those two verses that really drive home and put an exclamation point on the polar opposition of the nature of God from the nature of man. Okay? God cannot look upon evil because our sin absolutely disgusts the holiness of God. Okay? Like it doesn't say thou art pure of eyes than to behold evil and would rather not look upon iniquity. It says he can't. Is there anything that God can't do? Yeah, there's a few things. He can't lie. He can't look on iniquity. And then another word that we're going to take a look at. I will spew thee out of my mouth. We all know what spew is, right? Y'all seen Wayne's World? Right? Like Wayne and Garth, and then Garth's like, you're going to spew in this. Spew is more than to just spit out. Okay? I know it says that in a lot of versions, but here's the big difference. When you spit something out, that is a conscious decision. That is a voluntary thing that you can choose to not do. How many of you ever been on the on-deck circle with regards to spewing or vomiting? I don't want to get graphic, but everybody's been in that spot where you're just like, I don't want this to happen. I'd give anything, I just don't want this. Why this? Why this? Can I have a head cold or cough or something? Just anything but this. And you try and talk yourself down. And maybe that'll work. But let me tell you what. That is one of the most involuntary situations that you can ever find yourself in. Like, even while it's going on, you're just like, stop, no, don't, I don't like this. It's not something that you can control, and that's a big difference than to spit out. Because this is uncontrollable. This falls right into line with God not being able to do this. Now, as huge as this is, okay, because that's a pretty big perspective. That's a pretty big thing to wrap your head around. Lack of God's ability to accept this sort of thing. But no matter how big this is, let me tell you what. You can tune in anytime on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, I don't care what it is. You're never going to hear Rachel Maddow or Shepard Smith or Wolf Blitzer. They're never going to come on the TV and go, I'll tell you what the problem is sin. That's never going to happen. They'll tell you it's a bunch of other things. They'll tell you that it's the government. It's education. It's business. It's psychology. It's sociology. It's the people on that side of the aisle. No, it's the people on that side of the aisle. It's always going to be something else, but it's never going to be sin. It's never going to be sin. How's that song go, fellas in the back? Got 99 problems, but a sin ain't one? Is that? Probably not, but that's essentially how the world looks. Doesn't it? Like everybody wants to talk about the world's problems, but nobody will ever be like, yeah, the problem is there's a bunch of sin. You some kind of weirdo? I guess. If that makes me a weirdo. Because the world loves to ignore sin. It's something the world can do. God cannot ignore sin. God doesn't pretend that our sin is some kind of mental lapse or condone our sin simply because he's writing it off as, oh, that's just some silly human stubbornness. Oh, I wish those darn humans would get it right. He's not like that. God hates sin and does not lack the ability to turn a blind eye to it. I think I might have said that wrong. Did I say that wrong? All right. Glad some people are paying attention. God will not compromise his holiness by indulging our sinful behavior. And I know this seems harsh, but what we have to realize is that the stern holiness from God comes from God's perfect love for us. See, there are two amazing characteristics that are constantly at work. And God honors them both continually. His fiery holiness and his perfect love. They function together. They don't exist apart from each other. See, if God were only holy, we wouldn't stand a chance. And if God were nothing but love, rainbows and Skittles, it would be a lack of discipline and correction that would allow us to destroy ourselves. But instead, God's holiness and love combine in one amazing and vastly unimaginable outcome, and that is this. God becomes a human being and comes to us as Jesus Christ. Jesus walked among us. Jesus took on a corruptible body, a body that's vulnerable to each and every one of the same temptations that we're exposed to on a daily basis. Jesus lives a life that is wide open to sin. And in the end, manages to get to the other side of it, having led a sinless life. And in spite of all of this, he's crucified and punished for the sins of each and every one of us. And that's the heart of the drama of the cross. In Matthew 27, I'm going to continue starting at verse 45. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Some of them that stood there, when they heard this, said, This man calleth for Elias. And straightway one of them ran and took a sponge, and filled it with vinegar, and put it on a reed, and gave him to drink. For the rest said, Let be, let us see whether Elias will come to save him. And Jesus, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose, and came out of the graves after his resurrection, and went into the holy city, and appeared unto many. Now when the centurion and they that were with him watching Jesus saw the earthquake and those things that were done, they feared greatly, saying, Truly this was the Son of God. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Taking everything that we've just talked about, everything that we're understanding about God's holiness and his ability to look upon sin, it'll help us to understand something, and that's this, that Jesus had not experienced separation from God the Father throughout his entire life until that moment. Until the moment that he took his place on the cross. Because it was at that moment that Jesus Christ became the embodiment of sin. And it was at that moment when the punishment for all the sins of the entire world, as well as all the sins of the entire world to come, were put on his shoulders. Once he became the embodiment of our iniquity, God could no longer so much as look upon him. At that moment, Christ was truly forsaken. He was forsaken so that we might be forgiven and received by a holy God. He was forsaken so that the sinless righteousness of Jesus Christ could be our very own. That is the beauty of the cross. That's why all these silly Christians wear that cross around our necks. It's the most impactful, profound symbol that we have in Christianity. Because of what it says in 2 Corinthians 5:21, for he hath made him to be sin for us, who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. On August 16th, 1987, at approximately 8:46 p.m., Northwest Airlines Flight 225, carrying 149 passengers and 6 crew members, crashed shortly after takeoff in Detroit, Michigan. You guys remember this? As a result of the crash, 154 of the people on board were killed, and there was one survivor. A 4-year-old little girl named Cecilia. She was found by Romulus firemen in the wreckage, still seatbelted into her seat, just a few feet away from the bodies of her father, brother, and mother. You see, just prior to the crash, just as the plane was starting to lose control, Cecilia's mother unbuckled her seatbelt and knelt in front of Cecilia with her arms wrapped around her. And as a result, Paula took all the devastation of the crash and Cecilia lived. Paula took the fall for the daughter because she had a perfect love for that child. And God sent his son Jesus, who essentially wrapped his arms around each and every one of us to shield us from the devastation of the sin found in the wreckage of this world that we live in. And he did that on that cross that all them silly Christians wear around their neck. God is holy, and God is love. Our merits will never enhance that love. But on the flippity flip, our mistakes will never diminish that love. And that love of God, that perfect love, is totally available to each and every one of us through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And all we have to do is receive it. Will you receive God's love in Christ for you?